Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. You're listening to Yin Radio TV. I'm your host, Hillary Raimo. Tonight, joining me, I have a very special guest, Valeria Tignini. I'm so excited to introduce you to her, a.k.a. Val. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, grew up in New Jersey. She started to have her multidimensional experiences. We're going to get into that this broadcast. We're going to talk all about what that is. She began experiencing energy and ETs visiting her early on, and she never paid it much attention. She actually thought it was normal and that everybody experienced it. Then she moved to New York City. She created a lifestyle that was full of luxurious adventures, including starting her own business to empower women and men. And all in 1 year since starting her launch of her company, she was also a reality TV show star based on Val's life and what she does. She'll be talking and sharing some of that experience and telling us all about that. The second day, interestingly enough, that the TV pilot aired, she had a Kundalini awakening, and she's going to share that as well, talk about that, which changed the track of her life, as it usually does. After her enlightened experience, Val has gifts that allows her to be a vessel for source energy. We're going to be talking about source energy, what that is, how it's experienced, and how you too can connect to that. So she's going to share a lot of information. We're going to talk about Christ consciousness, divine feminine wisdom, star being contact, and a lot of great things. And her experiences are phenomenal and wonderful, and I'm so excited to have her here. Welcome, Val. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm so excited to be here.
So why don't you start off by telling us kind of, that was a vague kind of over, big picture kind of thing. And I know there's a lot of specifics. So why don't we kind of go back to the beginning to your, where you were at when you really started to have your awakening?
So which one?
Let's go to the first one.
Okay. Well, when I first experienced something that was out of the 3D world, I was about, I would say like 15 or so. And that's when I had a UFO come outside of my house. It was right in my backyard. And it was kind of like a small UFO. It wasn't like these, kind of like big, clunky disc UFOs, but it was very small. But I didn't know what it was at first. I just saw light, brightest luminous light I've ever seen in my whole life. And I was like, what is that? It's like, it was the middle of the night. And then I look out the window and I just see this ball, and automatically, and I just knew what it was. I knew it was a UFO. It was like, it just pulled me. I was like, that's a UFO. Okay. So I'm like, what are they doing here? And as soon as I connected with them consciously, they went away. Yeah.
Interesting.
But it didn't end there. So then I remember telling my mom about that. And I remember, asking like my neighbors, like, did you see anything last night? Like, no. So I was the only one that saw it. And so when you're the only one that sees it, you don't believe it. So then maybe like 2 years later, my sister, she's also connected, but refuses to admit it. She felt like a wisp blowing in her ear. It was like, it wasn't like, it was more like that. Right? It was very strong. And she told my mom and me, and she's like, I felt this. What is that? And we're like, oh, it must be a ghost or something, what else could it be?
Right.
And then the next night I had the same exact experience. So fast forward about let's say 12 years later, I was at a Colin Andrews. You know who that is?
Oh yeah.
The crop circle guy.
Yeah.
And I was at a Colin Andrews conference or whatever you want to call it. And he was talking about ETs and everything else. And, everybody was in the field. Like we were all, kind of vibing to that. And all of a sudden I felt this blowing in my ear, like just like that. And I was like, so I was sitting in the row where there was no one to my right and there was only someone to my left. So, and it was in my right ear. So I connected it to when I was a teenager, and I was like, oh, okay. It was an ET. I thought it was a ghost the whole time. I didn't connect the two. And so it was interesting how they decided to do that to me, later.
So that was the first way that they introduced, kind of interacted with you then, was this blowing in the ear. Interesting. Wow.
Yes.
Now, you didn't relate that immediately to ET contact?
No.
So you thought it was a paranormal type experience, and you were making your way through it in that sense. Have you ever since talked to anybody who has experienced that as well?
No, just my sister and I. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
So when you went to Andrew's event, and you had field experience, you guys were actually outside working in nature. Is that correct?
This is no, I call it the field because it's like I just kind of like everything goes higher in higher dimensions. So we don't know what dimension we're in, so I don't know what to call it. We're definitely not in 3D because he pointed at a screen. It was 4:44 p.m. and we all looked at the time, and it was exactly 4:44 p.m. So so it was just, we were all in that kind of zone.
Field. Yeah,
higher levels of higher consciousness, because we were so focused on what was happening, what he was saying. And it was new information, kind of like downloads. And so we were in a conference room. And so that was after my Kundalini awakening. So I was more aware and connected to energy. That's how it connected to that, when I was younger. I would think if I was still sleeping, I wouldn't connect it. I would just be like, that's just weird. What's a ghost?
Yeah. Your Kundalini experience then, do you feel that opened up your energy centers and made you more connective to the experience? Do you think perhaps if you had not had that, it may have been different or presented itself differently?
Absolutely. So that evening, after I attended Colin Andrews' whatever you want to call it, I don't know what you want to call it, workshop or whatever. I went home and I knew that I was in this, higher consciousness, higher state of consciousness. And I have in my bedroom, I had the bathroom that it was connected inside the room. So I see this, the door was ajar in the bathroom, and I see this bright, luminous light. And I was like, oh, interesting. Somebody's here. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to scare them away. I'm going to welcome them. I'm just going to lay here and see what happens. As soon as I said that, I had two tall beings in my room. They had like this whitish, grayish skin, more on the white side, with these grayish blue eyes. Mind you, it was pitch black, but for some reason around them, there was this white aura where I could see them perfectly. And they were wearing uniforms, grayish blue uniforms. It's funny, it's all very matchy. And then their hair was very short, two men, very short, and it was kind of like whitish blonde hair. So they looked at me, and I said, and I just laid there. I was like a little bit up to see that they were there, but I was still, I think, not scared, but I didn't know what was going to happen next. So I just looked at them, and they said, well, we've been waiting for this moment. You're ready. And they took my hand. I got off the bed. They took my hands. It's like I already knew what to do. And they took my hands, and in our bodies, we went up through my parents. I was staying at my parents' house that day, through my parents' house, like through their ceiling, into the sky, into the galaxy, into the universe. And we headed into this star, what I want to call it is like I guess it's a star planet.
Hmm.
And it was this shape. I could see it from going into it. It was this shape. And as I was getting closer with these two beings holding my hands, there was two beings waiting for us. And I could see that there was in this star planet, it was like a crystal city.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just a beautiful crystal city. And once I went inside, lots of stuff, lots of information was given to me. And then I just remember, I remember like in Tibet, not all, couldn't remember everything all at once, but ever since that day, I remember like I get flashbacks of that experience and the information. And sometimes I say things that I know comes from there. It's not from my memory of knowing, or I've never read it before. So it's very interesting.
Wow. Do you feel that did you feel like they're downloads, that you went to this place and feel like you were kind of downloaded with information?
Yes. So when I came back that morning, I woke up and I'm so glad that I was in my parents' house, because I had someone to immediately tell. And I said, Mom, I had the most incredible experience. She said, what happened? I started drawing, and I drew the star. I drew the star planet. And she's like, what is that? And I said, that's where I went. And she said, that's interesting. And then I started drawing the beings as well. And she's like, keep these. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm going to keep them. She says, who knows, maybe it'll come up, because we've both never seen it before. And so then of course, I went online and I started Googling. I just remember them telling me that I was in a state of higher consciousness. So I was ready. So first thing I Googled was higher consciousness. Mind you, I didn't even know what that meant at the time.
So you're really headed into it, aren't you? You're really going right there. Yeah.
So I was like,
what happened?
Higher consciousness. What does that mean? And so for some reason, I went straight to images, because I relate to things with images. And I went straight to images, and I just do a couple of scrolls, and all of a sudden I see this symbol just like this. And I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what I drew. And it was, so I click on it, and it was a painting that a woman had done. And she did it maybe like 6 months before my experience. And she told me, and I emailed her and I said, what is this? And she called it higher consciousness. And she wrote back to me and she said that she had a ET experience. And this was what she came back with. This is all she could remember. And I was like, okay. So that was a beautiful confirmation that I got. I actually wrote a blog about it. I mean, if anyone's interested, they can go to my website and they could look through the archives. And you can see the drawing that I made. You can see the painting that the woman did, and how it's so interestingly similar to the symbol, the mandala of Om.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. So when you were in this space and you were going through this kind of information gathering, aha moment type of thing, how was it for you to go from, the lifestyle that you were living to suddenly being immersed into the star being world? I mean, if you could sum that up in like one sentence, what would you say to people? Because I know there's others out there who have had that transition, that before and after type. What was that like for you?
Can I tell you something?
What would you say that was?
Before my awakening, which was spontaneous, I never meditated before. I didn't even know what consciousness meant. For me, going into a bliss state meant drinking a cocktail. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I was very social. I knew everyone that I needed to know in New York City. I was constantly interacting with people. I lived in New York City, so it was like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but everyone that I knew didn't relate to ETs. They lived in the 3D world. They lived in the material world. And so as soon as I was introduced to this, into higher awareness, broader awareness, I couldn't relate to anyone anymore that I knew. And it was very difficult for me to even engage in conversation because I was bored to death. All I wanted to know and talk about and really dig into was, what is happening to me, and what is happening to the planet, and why are ETs visiting me, and why am I experiencing all this energy and states of higher consciousness, and that's all I wanted to talk about. So I really was kind of going through the motions when I was still had my business. I was still dating regular guys, hanging out with my friends, I still hang out with my friends and I'm still close with my family, but it's funny because I've changed. The way they interact with me and the way they're engaged with me, they've changed as well.
So did your circle stay the same, or did you find that you shed a lot of people? Because that's kind of what happens. I mean,
no, it didn't.
Suddenly your orbit changes and everybody in it changes.
Yes, it's changed so much.
Yeah. So how did you handle that? What kind of emotional landscape was that like for you? Was it like a release and a happy experience, or did you have challenges?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely, there's challenges with any change, even if it's a positive change. I was really struggling with living in New York City. I was very sensitive all of a sudden to people, to energy, which I wasn't before, and I couldn't live in New York City anymore when I always thought I would live in New York for the rest of my life. I was obsessed, in love with the city. And I had to move into nature because I needed more quiet time. I stopped calling my friends. My family just kind of were like, what the heck happened to you? But they accepted me. So it was difficult. And, there was some arguments, of course, like, you're not the same anymore. And then, of course, you have to explain, like, I'm not the same anymore. And you have to accept it, or you don't. So that transition was very difficult for me. And I can see how it could be difficult for anyone. And it could be lonely at first because you're going from one world to the next, one reality to the next reality. And you're shifting so much that you don't even know where you're going to land.
That's great. And in some ways it's great because I think people who experience the star beings or ET contact, and whatever that means for them, whatever their experience is, it shifts from a perspective of the 3D world to a cosmic perspective instantaneously, and there's a massive breakdown that happens within that perspective. A lot of things change. Were you able to talk about your experiences to everybody, or did some people kind of reject you for discussing ETs or going into that subject?
I didn't even mention ETs at this point because I just was telling people that I've changed and that I see things differently. And I just kind of dumbed it down because, once you start talking about those things, then they're just like, oh, God, where are you going? Yes. Do you need to see a doctor?
The glaze over happens.
Should we drug you?
Okay, and the next question that kind of just comes up naturally for this is when you started to look into the information world, the UFO industry, I call it.
Yeah.
were you scared by all the things that were there, or were you a little bit confused? I mean, I've done a lot of shows on ETs and UFOs over the 11 years I've been on the air.
Yes.
I've talked to a lot of people in the field, some very well-known people, some not so well-known people, some contactee experiencers. And one of the things that they always said was, once I get into the information online, it's overwhelming and it's contradictory, and one person will say this, another person will say this. People don't like that person. People, like this person. It's like high school.
It is. And you know what? For me, my experience was beautiful. And I will never, if it didn't end there, I'm continuing to have these experiences with ETs. It's constant. And they're all very unique, and they're all very beautiful, because it changes something inside of me, and it's a gift. So I'm grateful. Now, not everyone has those experiences. Some people have what we call negative experiences. And, everything comes through, I see things, whatever you experience is coming from your mind. My mind sees ETs benevolent and good for me and for humanity, and maybe others don't, and therefore they experience that non-benevolent ET.
Yeah.
So, we have to go back to the truth, of which comes from, we are all one unified field, one unified consciousness. So how could consciousness be split up into negative and positive?
Or personality traits. Right. Or, psychological psychosis if it's a human being. Yeah, I agree.
Right. So it comes from your mind, how you, the power of the mind is very true.
Yeah. I think we're kind of coming into the realization that the power of human consciousness is a field that really needs to be further explored. It's like finding a new physics, really. I mean, we're doing all this research with CERN and things going on, and these things are coming out. And I think the next field is really understanding consciousness better, creating a new psychology to deal with these things, and going into different aspects of what human power really is.
Yeah.
And I think your experiences highlight that very intelligently and well, because if you come into the experience, I've had experiences myself. I've worked with Dr. Stephen Greer a few times, and it's always been a beautiful, happy experience. I have never had, and even before that, I've had experiences, and I've never had any bad feelings or bad experiences. People get really upset and angry and mad when you talk about beautiful, loving, star being experiences. And I always say, well, it didn't start with Roswell. It wasn't like the military just introduced it at Roswell. Because the timeline really does go from Roswell forward. Most people in the industry go back to Roswell and that's it. But I've done a lot of work with Native Americans in the past, and the myths and the stories and the rock art that goes way, way back before Roswell tells a different story. And, not everybody's exposed to that information or that perspective. And I think it makes a world of difference. And once you realize that you really are in control of some things that you experience, other things perhaps not so much, but if you make the intention and perspective one of love and oneness and higher consciousness, I believe that you really only allow that to come into your field, whatever that is. Yeah. So I commend you for speaking out positively about it, because not everybody has a positive experience. And we talk about reptilians and archons and all these things that exist to, excuse my language, fuck humanity up and make them go into these massive weirdo places.
Sure. And it brings people into a state of fear.
Right. And that fear can do a lot of damage in a lot of different ways. So once you started this experience and you were moving into this relationship that you were building with the star beings, I call them star beings just because it's happier. How did you move forward? Were you continued to be visited? You said you had continued to have visitations.
Well, you mentioned Dr. Greer, actually.
Yeah.
And I did go to see Dr. Greer. We went on one of his retreats, and I was actually 7 months pregnant, and and I had like this big belly, and we were chanting. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah, the pujas. Yeah, I remember
Right,
this.
the pujas, right, the toning, and suddenly we have lots of activity, but then these ETs come on the ground, and we see like a almost like a light from the sky coming down onto this field on Marco Island, and there was like this field of grass and maybe high weeds, and we all knew that they were there. I could feel them immediately. I was just like, okay, they're here. I knew that feeling. I'm familiar with it. And so we see the lights, and the lights are like these orbs, like about this big, and they would change color, and change color like from green to pink to blue. And so some people are like, oh, are those fireflies? Because they flash.
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah.
They blink. And so I was just like, I couldn't even move. I was like, I mean, let alone, I could hear what people are saying, but I'm like, I was just so, stuck on the energy. I was just like, oh, there, I just knew something big was happening. So to make a long story short, my whole belly started shaking, like really strongly, where I went down to my knees, and I knew I was going through something. I was familiar with the energy, so I just let it happen. Next day, I had Dr. Greer's assistant come up to me and said, one of the beings took me into your belly, into your womb, and I could see your daughter smiling.
Wow.
Yes. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, they're connecting to her? And he said, yes, they were. So after that, I went home, and they were always outside my window, these beautiful orbs, and they just kept coming, waiting for my daughter to be born. And I knew she was, she's connected to them, and I'm connected to them, and I guess as a family, her father is also connected to them. And then fast forward, I would always see them here and there, and I just said, oh hi, like I know you're there, but they didn't do anything, and maybe they came into my dream state, and sent me some messages, but I didn't see them physically. They didn't come to me, and they didn't take me away. But fast forward, on my retreat, I had a retreat in Phoenicia, New York, and it was at the Menla Center. It's basically a Buddhist monastery. It's beautiful, and we were having what I call a dreamtime session. It's in the middle of the night, and we do this session where I bring up the energy, source energy, bring up the energy in the room. And see, the thing with this room is that it's like kind of like an octagon, and half of the building is windows, floor to ceiling. And so you could see, we were on the hill, on the mountain, and we could see like the top of the trees. So it's very beautiful. But mind you, this Menla Center is 130 acres in the middle of nowhere. So there's no lights. There's no, the only lights that you can see are from the houses, and the houses are all like scattered along the property. So it was very, dark and desolate. All of a sudden, I feel while we were there, we were toning. All of a sudden, one of the guys from the retreat started toning, because he was connecting to the energy. And all of a sudden, everyone else started toning, and we're toning, and these tones started to bring in the star beings. And I could see them out the window, and I'm like, and I felt the energy, so I opened my eyes, because we all had our eyes closed, very, very harmonious, very beautiful. And I look out these windows, and I look out and go, and I said, they're here.
Mm.
And all of a sudden they all open their eyes, stop toting, whoop. And because none of them actually experienced ETs before. So
Mhm.
I said, ETs are here. They're outside the window and they're all looking outside and they're like, they look like fireflies. And I said, yeah. I said, keep
Wow.
watching. And they could see the orbs changing shapes and colors and like, oh, wow. Before you know it, they came into the room
Mm.
and we felt all these breezes. So we knew they were there. I knew it was there. I mean, I already knew they were there before the breezes started. I could feel the energy so high in the room. And now I said, do you feel that? And they're like, yes, what is that? I said, none of the windows were open. There's no way that we could even get a breeze. And they were just like, oh, what is that? And all of a sudden, one of the people in the room started channeling them.
Wow. What did they say?
Oh, gosh. We were with them for, I think we started around maybe like 9:30 till maybe 3:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So they were with us all night, but we decided to, finish it because we were all so tired. But they said that we need to wake up. That was the biggest thing that they said, wake up. And we need to wake up. We need to see what's happening to the planet. We need to see what's happening to humanity. We're moving into a new wave of consciousness. Gosh, there was a lot of, believe it or not, there was a lot of scolding. Basically saying, like, treating us like children, like you're not acting properly, and we're going to get, we're going to see the end results in a not positive way if we keep up the way we are.
Like a warning, would you say, like a warning to get our act together? Yeah.
Yeah. And so now most of them were like, what is going on? But still, engaged and, just taking it all in. There was a lot of energy in the room, a lot. I mean, you could cut it with a knife. And me, I'm just trying to, they were telling me things. They wanted me to channel. I wouldn't let them because I don't like to channel.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. And so I said no. So they honored that. So they said, okay, well, we're going to tell you something. And then they kept telling me things like what to do to the people. Like one of the people has it holds the keys. And I said, so I told him, I said, you hold the keys. And he goes, I hold the keys. What do you, it was, I mean, it was such a long story. That's like a whole nother interview, Hillary. It really
Wow.
is.
Well, I mean, I'm curious, when you go back to your original experience where you were taken to the Crystal City and you were conscious of some of the information transferred to you, we didn't really talk about what that was. Do you remember? Can you share with us some of the messages that you got from that experience? And I have a feeling they might cross over into some of the same things that had happened that night. But I don't know.
Well, funny you mentioned that. So that evening, that night at this retreat, everyone had crystals for some reason. I had brought this massive crystal and, about that big crystal quartz, and everyone else brought their crystals. Maybe like 3 people did. But a lot of people actually found crystals on the ground because at the Menla Center, it was hit by an asteroid. So there's crystal quartz all over the grounds. So anyway, they were taking, they had all their crystals in the middle of the room. Mind you, it's an octagon, right? So it was right in the center. We had like this kind of like empty space. And so we just put all our crystals. And all of a sudden, the guy that holds the keys, he says they're telling me that we need to put in all our crystals here in the center of the room. okay. So I was exhausted. So I'm like, you guys do it. I don't know. So they started creating a mandala, crystal mandala. So I look over and I said, oh, it's very nice, guys. Beautiful. And they created this beautiful shaped mandala. And all of a sudden one of the guys goes, this is interesting. This looks like a brain.
Huh.
And I was
like
like,
a crystal brain, right? Wow.
And so, it's funny because it is known that in your mind, they call it the crystal palace inside your mind. There's a shape of, I think it's in your pineal gland, right in front of your pineal gland, right behind it, I believe. There's like this shape like this, and it looks like, and they call it the crystal palace. So I was like, that's very interesting, because I was just looking at it. I said, you know what? Should I do something here? And I'm like, I don't know. Should I change anything? So I'm like, you know what? Let me spin this egg. There was an egg there. Let me spin the egg. Let's see who should change it this last tweaks. And the egg landed on me. So I was like, okay.
Of course. Yes.
So I tweaked it a little bit. And before you know it, I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh my God, this looks exactly like the crystal city that these beings took me to. The platform where the two beings were waiting for me, the city, the main city was a big crystal that I had, and then had all these different, places where you could go. I was just like, I was in awe. Like, how could this happen? Like, it was a combination of them and me. They could never know what I saw at the star planet. And, for me, I was just like changing it. I just do things without thinking. I don't really think that much. So I just did it. And then before you know it, I'm like, oh, wow, I just connected the two. So before you know it, this guy that had held the keys, he started chanting a number. And I can't tell you the number now, but I don't really remember it. So, and I don't want to mess it up. But this number was basically a number. We're like, oh, that's interesting. I think it was like 531, 531:15. I think it was that 531:15, which was basically the day of. It was that day, or the day before. It was the day before that day. And because we were the 31st, and I'm like, so one of the guys wrote it down, and I'm looking at it backwards, and I'm like, that says something. And he goes, what does it say? I'm like, serious. So this guy channeled the information. He said these numbers. These numbers were the date before the retreat. The day of the retreat. It was one day before that day. It was the day before. And it spelled serious. Now, mind you, everything I do, all of my sessions, all of my retreats, all my workshops, they're channeled information. I get messages and then I say, okay, I'm going to have this. I don't do it because it's coming from my ego and I say I have to have a workshop. And I get information, so I was telling everyone that this was a channeled retreat. And so it was. And that was my confirmation. I was so excited to see that because, of course, I doubt myself. Just like most
we're human. We're human. It happens, right? I mean, I think, and that's an important point, and I'm glad you said that, because so there's oftentimes this thing that happens when people do, what you do, or, we go out and we create these events, and it really does. We're humble. It's not like it comes from ego. And a lot of times when you mix business and spirituality, people tend to think that there's some kind of ego involved there. So thank you for mentioning that, because we're all human. We all have human abilities and weaknesses and strengths, and that's important to acknowledge. Nobody is super, everybody has to go grocery shopping and do laundry, and
that's right. No one's above that.
raise kids and deal with life. And I think that's part of it. And star beings seem to acknowledge that. And, saying align your life with earth-based principles that sustain all life and respect all life and all races. And every message I've ever gotten, and it seems, within your work too, because I've been watching your work for a long time, it's aligned with a kind of a totality that includes everything living alive that's connected, because everything is connected to source energy. So speaking of source energy, talk to us a little bit about your experience. What is source energy? How were you introduced to it? What was your first experience with it? What is that for people, for our viewers watching? What's that?
Well, source energy is everything and everyone, where everyone is connected to source energy, right? But there's some people that are a conduit to source energy, which basically they become almost like a vortex in connection to that energy, and then they can spread it outwards, or if they want to keep it into themselves, it's their choice too, but they could spread it outwards. Just like if you see a guru giving Shakti pot, or, and people just kind of go back and just like, whoa, they use the force, right? It's the force. And some people have the ability to transmit this source energy on, in a more condensed way, rather than it just being all, we are source. It's just a reminder. I like to say it's a reminder of who you are. And so what happened to me was that after I had this Kundalini awakening, all my chakras were lit up. I experienced my crown opening up, and I experienced source beyond I could ever, whatever. I just knew I was gone. There was no more me. So I was gone. And so I was enveloped, I was just part of everything and everyone. And when I came back into my ego, I know that life would never be the same. I just went home. I went home. And then it took a couple of years, but after I was activated, I like to say activated because the energy was always within me. I just wasn't able to transmit it the way I was, the way I do now. Mm-hmm. And so I was activated, and I actually heard a voice like, "You're ready." And so, of course, I self-doubted myself, but then I knew. And now I can do that. I can have sessions where with a bunch of people or one-on-one, and I can call in higher dimensional beings, and doesn't have to be, ET, could be even here. We have all kinds of multidimensional beings here on this planet. And, I have no fear. I have no fear of this. I never did. Even going into it, when it was happening, I was like, oh, I just knew everything that was happening to me was good. And, it's like, it's a remembrance. It's a remembrance because I know I've done it before. Because I do things that I realized, wait a minute, how did I know that I could do that? Or how do I know what to do or say? But I just do it. It just comes. It's a soul remembrance. It's in my DNA, maybe. I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't know that yet. But I do know is that I've done this before, and I just happen to be in this body. That's it.
I kept seeing you as the princess of the castle.
Interesting. Which one?
The Crystal Castle. The Crystal Castle. Like the Princess of the Crystal Castle. You have that energy. I mean, I know who you are. I've talked to you a couple times, but this is the first time I've actually interacted with you image-wise.
Yeah, it's true.
Talking, it's like, wow, she's the Princess of the Crystal Castle.
Oh.
It keeps coming.
Well, they keep coming to me, and it's interesting. I actually have pictures of them. They didn't have human shape. They had Syrian shape. Syrian, I don't know if you've seen Dr. Greer's little Syrian being.
I've seen a lot of his images, but I mean, it's been a few years since I've worked within his stuff, so I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
He did actually a documentary on it. They found a skeleton.
I was at his premiere in Los Angeles when that movie came out. Yes, the little being from the Atacama Desert.
Yes, so one of those were in the picture. The whole room was filled with beings, filled. We had a long skull, I guess that's what it's called, long skull being. We had a snake being. They had all different kinds of, I guess you want to call it imagery, right? Because
he does show that. He does show that in his expeditions. You gather in the space wherever you are, and he showed us a video of a bunch of different collected images over the years, and they were fascinating.
Yeah,
it was really fascinating. I mean, I don't know if he's released them publicly. We weren't allowed to share them, but just sitting there and watching them was fascinating because some of the images were just blew me away. I don't know if he shared that at your Marco Island event, but so go ahead. So keep going. So you had this little Syrian kind of.
So yeah, they're there, and it was real. They made it more real for us too, to even see the images of them, and they were all amongst us. It was like we were in a circle, and everyone had a being next to them. So it's for me, it's become very normal to deal with ETs. It's just like dealing with humans for that matter. And some people deal with angels, and I deal with them too. I deal with all kinds of multidimensional beings, all kinds. And I deal with, so it's funny that you talk about these images that blew you away. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the guys there was scared, terrified. He was so scared. He was holding on to one of the girls like it was his mommy. And I said to him, stop that. I said, you're bringing in fear into the room. You stop that. So I had to act like his mom because that's what he wanted at that moment. Mm-hmm. So shaking in his boots. And, he told me, he says, I don't want to ever come to any of your stuff again because his ego was not in control at that moment.
Well, fear changes the field.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we go back to that power of the human being. And when you have fear in your mind, your thoughts amplify, your emotions amplify, and it just completely ripples across everything. Just like if you consciously choose love, you can change the field by choosing love versus fear. So it's actually really interesting that you told him to stop. And that was your intuitive moment of saying, stop it. Because I've had that too, where, you interact with people or you have people in the room who bring that fear and everything changes instantly. It's like instantaneous.
It's true. And that's actually when they started acting up. That's when they started telling us, they started laughing at us with a channeler, right? The channeler was laughing at us. And I said, no, it's all, I know it was because of him, because he was scared. So they're laughing at our fear, which fear is not real. Right? It's all mine. It's all the ego losing control. And so I was just, he was acting out the whole time at the retreat. And I knew this was the epitome of his ego losing control. So I had to tell him, stop it. I had to do that. The whole time I was just kind of like, nursing him a little bit. But this time I almost had to whip him into shape because he was just going to ruin the whole experience for all of us.
Now, was this your own event, or was this at Dr. Greer's event? This was
mine. This is at my my retreat, which I'm actually having another Soul Rising number 2 this May. So at the same venue, because I think a lot of people actually heard about what happened last year and are very excited to experience.
Yeah.
It's not just about the ETs. You know, we've experienced so many different amazing things. We've experienced past life experience. You know, I take people back into their past lives and see how we're all connected, and, you know, even into their Native American connection. We did like a bonfire ceremony and a spiritual shower, which cleanses them completely of negative energies around them and even within themselves. So it's a very all-encompassing kind of retreat.
You can go to valsecrets.com, by the way, for those of you watching. You can find out all this information about her retreats, her sessions. I know you've done some work with Abney, if I'm
Abdi, yes, Abdi.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I'm curious about that.
I love him so much. He's like my family now. He's actually the one that gave me this Kundalini awakening, which he actually calls it the Holy Spirit running through you. So he says that because he relates more to Christ consciousness, and so that's the way he sees it. So Abdi, he does basically what I do. He activated me into this energy. He works with source energy, and he's very powerful. My sessions are different from his. He doesn't have these kinds of experiences with multidimensional beings or anything like this, but he's very powerful, that he can basically, at one of his sessions, I was levitating. He had his hand over my head. I was on my knees and I was levitating. That's how powerful he is. I'm very connected to him in this lifetime and past lives, in all our lives. So, you know, we're like brother and sister. And I have nothing bad to say about him, but he's just amazing. I love him so much. And I'm so grateful to reconnect with him again in this lifetime.
Now, talk to us a little bit about your past life experiences. What was the first time that you experienced your past life regression, or kind of the information coming back?
Gosh, I mean, I've experienced so many lifetimes, but the main ones that I keep coming back to me were in Atlantis, ancient Egypt, Hathor time. Many times in Egypt, by the way, many times. Hathor time, I actually lived, my father was a pharaoh, so was my mother, and I was a princess, I guess. And my family, we were all lived in ancient Egypt at that time, same time. I also was a Native American, a wife to a chief that was enlightened. I always in connection to higher consciousness, and it just keeps repeating itself, but different body. And I look always very similar. I could see my body. I could see what I looked like. I could see, I could literally walk back into that time and space. It's very easy for me to go there because, you know, for me, the timeline is kind of like one big, long film strip, and I could just tap into that time and space and just go there. So
have you physically gone back to Egypt by any chance? Have you actually gone there physically?
Not in this lifetime, no.
You have to go, sweetheart.
I know. I actually traveled there, and I went into one of the pyramids, and I walked through all these tunnels, and this is before I even knew that even these tunnels existed, and I was taken back to that time, and so it was just very interesting, you know.
Were you shown things when you were taken back into that time? Were you shown things? What was the main message for you? Was it just a remembrance of being there and connecting to the time-space point, or was there something that you were shown, you know, symbols on the wall? I mean, sometimes it gets to be choppy, and sometimes people have very specific experiences and go back and remember very clear things. I'm curious.
Yes. It was, you there? Are we breaking up? Or did we freeze? I think we froze. No.
Sometimes I feel like throwing my hands up in the air. I know I can count on you. Sometimes I feel like saying, Lord, I just don't care. But you've got the love I need.
Welcome to live radio, folks. That's how it works sometimes. So we were talking about Val's experience with these past life regressions. Yeah. And my question to Val was if you had remembered anything specific, if you had gone into this past life, specifically Egypt, and seen something specific that you had connected to that maybe has led you in ways that you didn't expect.
Yes, actually, I keep getting thrown back in there. But the first time I was there, it was remembrance. Like, you were here, don't you remember? You walk through these, tunnels. You know everything here. I was shown the hieroglyphics. I was shown almost like I felt like some of the things were ancient relics that were brought to Solomon's temple. And all these things that I knew that I used to use, and I saw wands, and I saw symbology. I saw like the Ankh, and it's funny. I've been connected to the Ankh since I was 12 years old. Speaking of which, I saw this ring in this fair in Brooklyn, and I was 12 years old. I remember I just got my period. And I was becoming a woman, and I bought this ring, and I remember, the ring kind of like, I never saw that symbol before in my life, but the ring kind of just glued, like it had this glow around it, like, by me. And I picked it up, and I put it on, and I never took it off till I was 18 years old. And I took it off because that was the first time I had sex.
So the energy had changed for you. So you had kind of gone to a different phase, a different activation of sorts, because sexual energy is a different activation. Literally changes the chemistry in the body.
There you go. And I didn't know that.
Yeah, it does. And so does menstruation. Menstruation changes the chemistry in a woman's body. And then the first time someone has sex, it changes the chemistry as well. So when you go to Egypt at some point,
I saw that you went to Egypt.
I wish the Middle East would just clean itself up. I mean, I just came back from Egypt recently, and
I saw that.
It's so ridiculous how humanity, where the direction is going. I mean, we have so much light on the planet, but we also have so much dark. And we talk about ascending duality, but yet duality is one of the basic laws of our 3D world. And so I really believe that we do have to learn how to work within duality so that we understand light and shadow, because we exist in light and shadow. Yes. And as long as we're here, honoring and respecting the rules and laws that govern our existence in the physical body is worthy of learning how to do that, because humanity, I believe, has that power inside of them. And some people are just blowing it. They're just blowing it right off, and they don't have any respect for life. They don't have respect for themselves. They don't have respect for each other. And, Egypt really has this incredible vibration. And as we ascend and go through the astrology and these different points in time as our planet is spinning through the cosmos, I really believe a lot of these pyramid sites vibrate to that energy. And the more people that can get there and experience that, it has a profound effect on the body. I mean, I've been to Egypt 4 times, and each time is unique and different, and the vibration is different, and there's new experiences that come up. So to get someone like you there, to go, hey, Val, get to Egypt and go in the pyramid and channel your source energy and get into your space, I think would be necessary for humanity. But because we have these ridiculous personalities governing the world and doing war and hurting and killing each other, and my God is better than your God, so therefore, in the name of my God, I kill you. It's insanity. I just think that if we could erase all that and stop it, like you said, the guy, stop it, stop being fearful. People like yourself, people who have these awakenings and these experiences then can have opportunities to go to these ancient temples and ancient sites that were very aligned to the earth energies. And they amplify the earth energies. We have a lot of researchers, mostly male oriented, that go into these places, study the measurements, give us the statistics, blah, blah, blah. But we don't have a lot of people that go in and pray. I mean, the prayer aspect, going in and being and meditating and feeling that source energy come up through the body is, I think, more important than figuring out the angles and the all of that other stuff. Well, it's all relevant. I'll give it that. But if we had a really great situation going on in Egypt, you could get on a plane and go, bring your daughter, bring your husband, and say, oh my God, as a family, sit there and meditate and go into the chambers. I mean, how profound would that be? But because we have idiots running around muck, creating all this ridiculousness, we're stopped from experiencing that, which is unfortunate. And I'm done ranting, but that's my rant for the evening.
I'm with you. The thing is, we are supposed to be challenged that way. We just are. And so we need these catalysts to, actually the catalysts are what awakens us. Why can't we go into the pyramids? Why can't we see the other parts? Why is it closed off? This is an important part of humanity. Why can't we know this kind of information? Or maybe there's something to experience there. Why can't we experience it? So, I mean, sometimes people have an awakening through their mind, which comes through curiosity and breaking through these paradigms that we're dealing with now. And then some people have awakenings through experience of what they see and what they can feel. And then the other one is what I experienced, which is basically having all your chakras blown up. And that's the real
Isis work. That's the real Isis goddess work, right? We're not blowing up malls and things. We're blowing up our chakras and opening up ourselves and moving into that. That is so important. If you could sum up your experience, I'm curious about your experience in nature as well. You talked about having to leave the city once you had all these catalytic kind of events. Mind-changing, heart-changing, and you had to move out of the city into nature. I do a lot of work with my Love, Breathe for Earth platform where we meditate in nature and we go out and we do these things. I'm curious what your experience is working in nature and just connecting to the source energy within nature and what you've felt.
Well, I was always on, because your mind is kind of more quiet in nature. So I was always on. So I was constantly experiencing energy. I could remember on November 11th, 2011, which was a big energetic day for the planet. I saw a movie of my past lives, my present life, and my future lives, basically on the wall of my living room. It was like my third eye was projecting this movie onto the wall. And I was basically just telling the stories to my partner. And I was just telling him all these things. I was like, so this is what's happening, and this is who you are, who you were in my past lives, and this is what's going to happen now. I'm going to have a baby girl in next month, and all these things. It's just like, you're just listening, like probably thinking like, what the heck is going on? He's used to this kind of stuff anyway, but I mean, that's the kind of things that happen in nature. You just kind of go there. And, I told you I was visited by ETs almost all the time after I got pregnant because of, their connection to me and the baby and everything else. So it was very, it was a very good place to be in nature.
Well, the frequency of the planet changes all the time. The bird's song changes, slightly here and there, and it's different than listening to a YouTube video of it. And sometimes we have to be reminded to get outside and touch the ground and listen to the animals and really connect as a fellow participant on the planet, right? We're more like animals than we are really anything else. We have to live by the earth changes and adjust to the earth changes and, just like they do. So we have a camaraderie in that sense. Yeah. If you could give humanity a message right now, considering what the world is doing, we have this crazy election going on in the United States and around the world, really what happens here in our power structure has a ripple effect out into the world. The United States is one of the bigger power brokers, and we have all of this international connection web stuff going on. So what happens here really does affect the whole planet. How do you see the modern day, the now moment type thing that's going on with the elections and the chaos and some of the stuff happening? What would you say humanity needs? What's the message that you get when you kind of meditate on what's happening?
The biggest thing that I could tell anyone is that trust whatever happens is for the best, because whoever gets elected is already, first of all, they're already pre-elected. Right. I know a lot of people are like, oh, vote for this one, but they're already chosen. It's all pre-elected. And if it's not pre-elected by the people, it's pre-elected by our boss, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. It's already chosen. So there's whoever's up next, there's a force behind them. And whatever force that is, always trust that it's for the betterment of humanity, because we're not going down, we're going up. We're heading into the golden age. We're not going into this bronze age or the silver. We're done with that. We are getting better. We are waking up. So whoever's next is going to be, consider them a catalyst. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't seem the smartest or the most compassionate or the most, I guess, suitable for time and day. Gosh, we're still dealing with these kind of sleepy heads, ego controlling freaks that just want to do whatever it takes to become president. But always leave us with broken promises. But it doesn't matter, because there's a song with the Kinks. They say, meet our new boss, same as the old boss. They're always the same. They're always doing the same kind of things, but the force behind them is different. And they can't help it, because that's what it is. The God field speaks, and we are heading into a beautiful time and space, and know that we're going into the golden age, and that's all that matters.
How do you see now, when you're doing spiritual work, as you know, oftentimes we come up against shadow aspects. We come up against some of the challenging traits that we hold as human beings. How do you work the shadow stuff into your work? How do you deal with that?
So the shadow stuff is all energy as well, obviously, but shadow stuff comes from your mind. Our mind creates shadows. So what does that mean exactly? For example, one person can have an experience of, let's say, seeing a murder, and the other person sees the same exact thing. One person leaves and for the rest of their life, they can never get this scene out of their heads. They're affected so badly, and they have to see a therapist, and they can't move on from that experience. The other person sees it as a catalyst and says, you know what? I'm going to try to help women. Let's say if it was a woman, I'm going to help women stay more protected. I'm going to empower myself. I'm going to, speak to many people about this, about the awareness of being safe. So it all depends on how people see their shadows. Now, I've had shadows. I still have shadows, but I watch my shadow. I see what is it there for? What is the purpose of this shadow? There's a purpose for everything that you experience in your known life. And so we have to be reminded of this, that whatever we're experiencing, as hard as it is, as difficult as it is, as painful as it is, it's all something for us to learn from and to transcend.
Well said. I like how you put that. So when a client comes to you and they're stuck, they've witnessed a murder, they're stuck in therapy, they can't move on, how do you guide them through that? Because there are people who can take these shadow aspects and use them as catalysts, and they do it very well. And you learn to do that, I think, the more you come up against it. But when someone is truly stuck and really it's devastating their life, how do you help them move through that with the source energy and the work that you do?
First step is I basically talk to them through, I just talk to them. And when I see what comes up, how they're triggered, I take them back to that time and space and kind of even take them to where they actually felt that pain or that fear or wherever it is that they felt that really is created a shadow for them. And if I don't need to do that, because most people don't even need to go there, because I would consider that one, in that sense, like someone who is more mental than someone who's more spiritual. I usually just do it energetically. So energetically is just going to where it's stuck. So most people have it stuck in one of their chakras. It could be in their heart. It could be in their third eye. It could be in their solar plexus. Wherever it's stuck, then we just work with it and release it. And it's very simple. It doesn't seem, I know it sounds like a miracle, but it's actually very simple. Once you consciously know where this experience lies within your body, then you can release it.
And so once somebody releases it, do you see it as creating kind of more space for light? Yeah, that's kind of how I see the shadow, yeah.
So many of us, because of a bad experience or our shadows, we create disease within our body. We create mental disorders. We create all kinds of stuff that we don't really need, right? Why would we want to have cancer? Why would we want to have a mental disorder? So now some people say it's karma. It's some people say that it's what you need to have in this lifetime for it to be a catalyst to learn and move on. That's fine, but your soul knows what you need and what you don't need. Our mind can create a story, and it could create the story, make it real. But if the story isn't real, then you can just pop the story and it's gone. So it's the same. It's that simple. And that's how I see it as on an energetic level. And that's how I talk to my clients all the time. That basically your shadow is a story that you're running, and you hold on to it. It's like you're holding on to luggage for the rest of your life.
Dragging it all around.
Dragging it around. This is my story. Look at my luggage.
Yeah, with that said, I think it's important also for others, when they observe this in another person, not to create spiritual guilt. I see a lot of people who go and they kind of blame the person for getting sick or for having a disease. And I just think that creates an ugly, sticky energy. It's like each person has their own path, and we're not all alike, and we all have to experience what we experience, and we have unique like an architectural design, so to speak. And what we get in this lifetime, and the lessons that we learn do continue on in the DNA, do continue on in the spirit to the next one. And so we really don't know the bigger picture all the time. And so it's important to hold the space in a compassionate, loving, light and tone for other people. As healers, when people come to us and say, we want to work with you, we need some help, that's a humble thing. And then there's times where the healers need the help too. And, there's no shame in admitting that we need help. And there's no shame in saying, this is acceptable for your path, and I honor that, and thank you for letting me witness it, because we all learn in that sense. And so there's like a spiritual arrogance thread that runs through some of the New Age industry where people are very shaming almost in that sense. I've seen it. I've seen it a lot, and it's too bad because there's a lot to be learned from that. I mean, I've been through my own health issues, and, you know, I know what it feels like to be rejected and, oh, you're not a spiritual person because you have health issues. That's the most horrible thing anybody can ever say to somebody. And then I've also had people who were very compassionate, and that made all the difference. It's like you never really know what effect you're going to have on another person. And I say kindness always has a tremendous amount of healing effect versus something that's unkind or judgmental or that sort of thing. Now, you're a mom. You have a beautiful little girl. How does this spiritual stuff that you do work into parenthood?
Everyone asks me that.
Well, it's a good question.
My daughter was born with the knowing. She was meditating when she was 6 months old. She knows the word Om, and she knows that Om means holy, I guess. She considers it as holy. And so if she sees something that she says that she considers holy, she says, Mommy, that's Om. And I said, yes, baby, that is Om. I mean, everything is Om, but she'll like look at a statue of Krishna. She says, Mommy, that's Om. Or look at a picture of Jesus and says, Mommy, that's Om. And she just knows. She's very psychic, very intuitive. She can tap into past lives as well. I mean, she's far ahead of me. And she's only 3 years old, but that's the future of humanity. I'm not the only one. She just happens to have a place, a home where her parents kind of allow for her to be that way. Maybe another parent would say, "Why? What are you saying?" And what are you talking about? This was your other mommy, and I'm your now mommy. Like a mom would be like, what are you talking about? I'm your mother. Why are you saying that woman's your mother? And it's just, so.
So what do you say to parents who go through that? I mean, as somebody comes to you as a client and says, my child is having all of these things, these weird things, and they are in fear of it. How do you move them out of that fear into love?
Well, I mean, for me, everything is about trust. Mm-hmm. Trust and faith. Okay. Do you love your child? Yes, of course. Everyone loves their child. So trust your child. If you don't trust your child, how could you fully love them? So, I mean, most parents want to be in control, and they want to know exactly everything what their children are talking about and playing with. And, a lot of people that are becoming parents are becoming conscious as to what children are eating and, not being vaccinated and all these things. But then what about the rest of their upbringing? Are you allowing for them to experience other different religions and understanding different, ways of playing and using their imagination? And, they're not just stuck on the computer. I go outside and I play with my daughter, and I say, Anastasia, do you see anything? She'll be like, yes, Mommy, actually I do. And I see something over there. And, when she was just 7 months old, she told me she saw fairies in like the snow. And I believed her. We have to trust that and believe that our children are far more advanced than we could ever be. We're stuck in our minds pretty much 90% of the time. And they're stuck in their hearts.
It's a beautiful innocence. It's kind of like, once we need to protect the innocence in the children.
Yes.
There's way too much abuse going on this planet for young children. And there is a quality of consciousness as a child that is really potent and powerful. And if it's given the room to nurture and to grow and to expand, I see a lot of them coming in now with potential solutions to problems on the planet. offering a lot, and we become guardians of them. And it's not just typical standards that we've all been taught how to parent or we think we're supposed to do. I really, really get nervous with the vaccine agenda because of the way that the vaccines themselves are evolving, and the way the whole industry is bringing in, GMOs and the things that we're consuming. I think it's parents' responsibilities to be educated and knowledgeable about these things, to be, to understand it. And majority rule kind of thing, when enough of us stand up and take, this is going to be a no, eventually we'll topple over the establishment's control on that. We may see it in our lifetime, we may not, but I think our children may, or our grandchildren may. And that's going to be a celebration time, because once we stop poisoning the body, the earth is a mirror. And when we stop poisoning the earth and we stop poisoning the human bodies with things that are detrimental to it, like fluoride and other chemicals, pesticides, things of that nature, we're going to see an interesting bloom effect, I think, in humanity itself. And people like you doing this work with your children. I mean, my children are older, but it's interesting to see how the younger ones are coming in with all of these amazing abilities.
Oh, yes.
And it's everywhere. And the generation of parents that perhaps are awakened and have gone through like experiences like you've gone through have a completely different perspective on how to guide and parent them versus other parents who haven't had those experiences and are very rigid in their thought processes and their consciousness and their belief systems. And they're having a hard time with these children. Mm-hmm. Is autism a mutation because of the poisoning in our bodies, or is it a mutation in consciousness? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, how do you see it? But I don't know. What do you think about that? What do you think about all of that?
Well, my daughter, she's very special, but my daughter was also born with a lot of fear. She's scared of many things, and including water, and so some things you come in with, you're not, and then that when you come in with it, that means you have to overcome it and transcend it. So it's a challenge. And so for example, like you were talking about autism, I believe that this is one of their challenges, how they learn and grow from that, and how they can, they don't have to overcome this. Most of it is a mental glitch, basically. They think differently from us, and that way they act differently from us. Those who don't have autism, so they're just different. And some who have autism, actually, they overcome the quote unquote disease, right? And they can evolve and be a different kind of human. I mean, that's all it is. And so we need to learn that we're all different kinds of beings are coming in, and what they're connected to, we don't know that yet. We don't have that kind of understanding yet. And I know that a lot of people are suffering because they think that their child is not able to live in the world, but the world is starting to change, that these kinds of people can be supported. And so there's nothing to fear, If we look at things in the positive light, then things will come out that way.
Yeah, we have an effect on the observer effect. It's physics. It's basic, and it's proven. Science proves it, so therefore it's real.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you see yourself working with kids at some point, doing these source trainings, these kind of meditative type things? Are you...
Funny you say that. Well, remember when I said I saw my future life? So I saw myself like maybe in 70s, and I had like a school. And the school was for children. So, and I remember I was teaching them, it was like a kind of like, how we say the Pledge of Allegiance? Mm-hmm. But it was almost like the pledge to ourselves, of the pledge to I. And it was fun. I saw the whole thing. I saw the school was out all in nature with these beautiful white buildings. So yes, not right now. In the future, in the long future, I probably will. Yes.
That's great, and I really hope that manifests. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show, and we had a great conversation. Thank you so much for this. This was
Thank
really
you. It was fun.
What do you want to? What note do you want to end on? I mean, if you had to sum up a vision for humanity that you see, would you share that with us?
Sure. Like I was saying before, we're all evolving into a higher state of consciousness. Some of us don't realize that it's happening, and some of us do. Some of us is actually physical, where it literally shakes us to our own physical body. And then some of us is just very subtle. And so we have these glimpses of awakening where we experience energy or we see something that's supernatural. And so we need to all trust that most people that are watching this are already on that path. They're already expanded their awareness and experience higher states of consciousness. But maybe their sister or their friends or their neighbor have not yet. So I always say that once you've touched it, you are it's like a domino effect. If you can just touch someone in that way, then it affects them. And it's like a seed in them. So we're all one. We're all one. We're all connected. We're all united in one state of, one harmonious state of consciousness. So we all are affected in some way and somehow. Some of us might suffer from it, being that, most people will either perish from a disease or maybe from a tragic event, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I know most of us suffered from people who pass away, and I can understand that, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. They come back. The whole point is that they come back in these more higher state of consciousness, and so there's a purpose for that. So I know many of us are witnessing that, more people with diseases and all kinds of weird things are happening in the world, all these wars and everything. It's all designed that way for us to elevate. Because as we elevate, then the planet starts to elevate as well. And sometimes the planet needs to elevate, so we need to elevate as well. So we're two in the same, we're one in the same, but everything needs to kind of be in a state of balance. Otherwise, something has to fall off. And so that's why we're seeing so many wars and so many people dying. And but know that everything that's happening is for the good, and that trust your instincts, trust your surroundings, and trust that everything that is happening to you on a personal level is a lesson for your own soul.
Beautiful. Valeria Tignini, valsecrets.com. Thank you so much for being here. All of you, you're listening to Yin Radio TV. I'm your host, Hilary Raimo. And until next time, namaste, everyone. Good night.
Good night.